Comparative Spiritual Hermeneutics by Corbin. There is an Arabic term, the word hikayat, the apparent ambiguity of which connotes simultaneously the sense of narrative, account, history, and that of imitation, mimesis, as though to signify for us that the art, or the style of the narrator, the historian, is basically that of mime. The ambiguity of the term is indicated, not without humor, when it is used to designate a grammatical point, where a word employed by an interlocutor is repeated in the reply, placing it in the same grammatical case, even if a solecism results. In order to transpose the example into a language more commonly accessible than Arabic, let us suppose that someone says to me in Latin, "Puto eos esse Romanos," and in reply I do not say "non sunt Romani," but "non sunt Romanos." In order to imitate the initial form used by the interlocutor, to retain it in passing from the datum to the response, it is necessary to consent to this unusual figure that suspends grammatical law. That is a hikayat. It is precisely this which imbues the actual idea of hikayat with its full significance. It is said, for example, that the procession of pilgrims around the temple of the Kaaba at Mecca is a hikayat of the procession of the angels in heaven around the celestial temple. A hikayat is therefore an imitation, a mimesis, a repetition, a history, certainly, but a history that is essentially an image or symbol. It is this symbolic quality of the history that imparts, as such, an unusual form to the commonplace texture of external events. The latter are henceforth related to a higher requirement, just as, in the example given above, the hikayat suspended the usual grammatical rule. From that point onward, it is impossible not to question the meaning of that history and, in general, the meaning of all history, for a traditional culture, particularly the one that concerns us here, in the case of Islamic gnosis. This meaning cannot be anything other than the spiritual truth, the hakikat, of that history, and this spiritual truth cannot be glimpsed without placing oneself within a perspective altogether different from the one familiar to our modern mythology of the meaning of history. That is why the term hikayat seems to me to introduce best a certain way of viewing the theme that has been suggested to us this year, namely, the human drama in the world of ideas. Because it refers all of history to another universe, this term leads us, in fact, to an immediate broadening of the suggested subject. That is, in the spiritual world, the world that is at once real and invisible, not a world of abstractions and general technocratic laws, but a concrete spiritual world which is the place of events in heaven. Since Hegel established the phenomenology of historical consciousness, we have been accustomed to placing nature and history in contrast, with history constituting in its own right the world of man. Now, for the type of vision of the world that we will consider here, which includes everything that is closely or distantly related to Neoplatonism, the opposite of nature is by no means history, since history, like nature, is also part of the physis. It is the victim of the irreversible sequence of chronological time, of a homogeneous time that measures the revolutions of the stars. Its events are subject to the laws of a space that disperses them far from each other, that renders them absent from each other. Taken as a whole, the opposite of nature and history is to be sought in the vertical, in a world whose level dominates the level common to both nature and history. This is the spiritual world, which presents a highly complex structure of diversity and hierarchy. Both the natural world and the historical world of man on earth are the hikayat, the mimesis, afflicted, alas, by an inevitable solecism, which is the history that is an imitation of the world of the soul. Nature and history are both the visible, external, esoteric, zahir, appearance of this spiritual world that is the hidden, the truly real, hakikat, the esoteric, batin. It is in this world that true history is revealed by an approach that is called, in Arabic, ta'wil, spiritual hermeneutics, a process that consists etymologically in bringing back everything, every event, to its truth, to its archetype, asl, by uncovering the hidden and concealing the appearance. It is evident that The meaning of prophethood, for example, is not in the simple material facts of the external biography of the prophets and the imams of Shiism, but it is in their spiritual meaning, that is, in the events that happen to them invisibly in the world of the spirit. Externally, these events have a natural framework, human scenery. Nature, too, is a liber mundi, the hidden meaning of which must be deciphered by ta'wil, just as by means of ta'wil, the spiritual meaning of the liber revelatus is unveiled, the true meaning of the book that descended from heaven, and thus the secret of the prophets, that is, that of hero history. By its nature, at the heart of a prophetic religion, that is, a religion that professes the necessity of superhuman mediators between the divinity who inspires them and humanity as a whole, there is the phenomenon of the sacred book, that every prophet who has the quality of a messenger, mursal, rasul, brings to man. This phenomenon preeminently creates a hermeneutic situation, the great issue being to know and understand the true meaning of the book. It is on this point that, for a number of years, my research has drawn my attention to the common factors in the manner in which spiritual individuals, mystics or mystic theosophers, have read or read the Bible in Christianity and the Quran in Islam. I do not refer in any way here to the very famous medieval theory of the four meanings of the Scriptures, literal, moral, allegorical, and anagogic. This theory, in relation to our present subject, is as inoperative as it is harmless. The way of reading and comprehending to which I refer presupposes, in the strict sense of the word, a theosophia, that is, the mental or visionary penetration of an entire hierarchy of spiritual universes that are not discovered by means of syllogisms, because they do not reveal themselves except through a certain mode of cognition, a hierognosis, that unites the speculative knowledge of traditional information to the most personal interior experience. For, in the absence of the latter, technical models alone would be transmitted, and these would be doomed to a rapid decline. It also happens that the truth of the hidden meaning is manifested from time to time as a new revelation, under the inspiration of the Spirit. The hermeneutics are renewed. They accompany the recurrence of a certain number of archetypes, which attests, in a way, to the objectivity of the spiritual worlds on which these hermeneutics rely. Only two pinnacles can be considered in the course of this discussion. In the 18th century, in Christianity, the great Swedish visionary theosopher Emanuel Swedenborg, 1688 to 1772, was truly, in his immense work, the prophet of the internal sense of the Bible, and this spiritual sense has nothing to do with allegory. In Islam, on the other hand, there is the entire religious phenomenon of Shiism, which, whether in its 12 imam or 7 imam Ismaili form, is based essentially on the spiritual hermeneutics of the Quran, on the esoteric sense of the prophetic revelations. Of course, I am the first to recognize the complexity, to say the least, of this comparative task. We should begin, no doubt, by comparing information that is common to the Bible and the Quran regarding the history of the prophets. We should also pinpoint the differences and specify their source. In addition, we must analyze how, in both cases, owing to the spiritual hermeneutics professed, there is a tendency to construct a general theology of religions. It is certain, for example, that the Swedenborgian vision of the Nova Hierosolyma aspires to a loftiness of level that is not the one of official dogmatics, just as the loftiness of level of the Ismaili hermeneutics of the Quran is not the same as that of Sunni Islam. Finally, in both cases, we are concerned with spiritual hermeneutics that are rigorous, systematic, and highly complex, in full possession of method, and vivified by a spirituality that cannot be ignored if there is a true desire to understand and interpret, for that is the actual meaning of the Greek word hermeneia, hermeneutics. The methodological and philosophical presuppositions of this study, however, cannot be clearly stated without applying them. On one hand, symbolic hermeneutics are developed by Swedenborg with systematic precision and admirable coherence, and applied to every detail and representation, to every person, every image of verses of the Bible. On the other hand, Shiite hermeneutics are developed on several planes or octaves of universes. For Ismailism in particular, all the events of hero history have agents who are members, hudud, of secret celestial and terrestrial hierarchies. The exoteric narrative of their acts is only the hikayat, the mimesis of events that take place in the spiritual world. The true nature and role of the protagonists, their activity and its meaning, escape the notice of external history and the historian of external things. Despite the complexity of these matters and the incompleteness of preliminary work, perhaps an initial result may be hoped for if we limit ourselves to the meaning discerned, in both cases, in the events that continue to be the beginnings of the spiritual history of man. What does the role of Adam signify? What does the departure from paradise signify? What is the significance of the drama experienced by Noah? What do the ark and the flood represent? It is striking that in both cases it is proclaimed that this is not the history of a past that is closed and gone, but that it has a present significance, and that the meanings which emerge in both cases are convergent. We ourselves must proceed phenomenologically, that is to say, hermeneutically. These are the modes of being, modi essendi, that are expressed in modes of understanding, modi intelligendi, and in this way it can be discovered what there is in common in the approach of thought and in the structure of the universes reached in both cases, in the series of events, and in the postulates that are clearly stated. Perhaps this research is only a venture, but where can it be attempted if not at Eranos? It requires recourses other than those that suffice for philosophical discussions, means other than a transposition of methods or results ranging from historical criticism to criticism of the Quran, which at best leads to nothing but a Quran that has never been read by any believer. Our point of departure is a spiritual fact, a phenomenon of understanding. How has certain information common to the Bible and the Quran been read and understood by spiritual individuals who had faith in these books, and how is a certain type of common comprehension revealed in the manner of perceiving the hidden meaning of events and the universes that this meaning presupposes? The issue, then, is a comparative study that consists essentially in the hermeneutics of the phenomenon of the sacred book.